and welcome to the I-24 News Desk. I'm Tal Heinrich with an extended news update for this hour. We begin with the continued tension in the West Bank. 3 Israelis were murdered overnight Friday in a stabbing attack in the settlement of Halamish, northwest of Ramallah. Emergency services received a report of an assailant who penetrated a private home and stabbed family members as they were having their Friday dinner. Paramedics provided medical treatment on location to 4 wounded. 3 of them succumbed to the wounds. The victims are a 70-year-old man and his 2 children, both in their 30s. The terrorist, identified as 19-year-old Omar El Abed El Jalil from the village of Kubar near Ramallah. He was shot and neutralized by a neighbor of the family. 2 hours before committing the attack, he took to Facebook and wrote a post, this post about his intentions. He called on other Palestinians to carry out more attacks, saying, quote, "I only have a knife. Where are other people who have weapons?" Palestinian militant group Hamas praised the attack on Twitter, referring to it as heroic. The Office of UN Security General Antonio Guterres issued a statement condemning the attack. The emergency services that arrived in Halamish described the chaotic scene.
Tonight, we arrived on the scene and we found 3 patients in critical condition. We immediately started life-saving procedures. In addition, there was another wounded person who had a stabbing in their back, and she was transported to the hospital in stable condition. The assailant was neutralized by a neighbor, and he was found with 2 or 3 gunshot wounds and was taken to transported to a hospital with a military ambulance crew.
To further discuss this escalated situation, we have Olivier Rafovich in the studio with us, counterterrorism expert. Thank you for being with us today. But first, I want to go live to I-24 News senior defense correspondent Shai Ben Ari, who is in Halamish right now, where the attack took place last night. Shai, what can you tell us about the scene there in the morning after? What has been the Israeli reaction to this attack so far?
Right. Well, of course, it's a somber mood here following this very serious attack in Halamish. This is a religious community, of course. It is already the Jewish Sabbath, so people here aren't saying a lot, and they don't want to be exposed to the media at all. Of course, it's very quiet at the moment. Earlier, there was a visit conducted here by no less than the Israeli Minister of Defense, who was also accompanied by the IDF Chief of Staff and other top military officers. He met with them here. He received an assessment of the situation and gave certain directives. He said that the process of demolishing the home of the terrorist, Omar El Abed, who was from the nearby village of Kubar, should be accelerated. This usually takes at least a few days for the approval of this very controversial measure, it has to be said, to demolish the homes of terrorists. But it has come to be the real typical response when you talk about this great of attack, this severe of an attack. We typically see a response by the Israeli military authorities moving in to demolish the homes of terrorists responsible for these kinds of attacks. That is expected within the coming days. We know that an IDF force already moved into the village of Kubar overnight and mapped out that house. They also conducted an arrest of the brother of the assailant. He has been taken in for interrogation to figure out if there was any prior knowledge by anybody connected to Omar El Abed that may have known of this attack or plans for it beforehand. They're trying to get to the bottom of that. Updates expected later on that issue. Also, the Minister of Defense calling for security to be bolstered at sensitive locations across the West Bank on roads that are known to be dangerous and so forth. We know that a number of IDF battalions which were on standby have been moved into the West Bank to be deployed and to beef up security. There is, of course, the ongoing issues in the Temple Mount, the Haram al-Sharif compound there in Jerusalem, and it's expected there could be further rounds of violence. Though the real big day in terms of riots in Jerusalem, that was yesterday. It probably won't get that bad today, but there could be further developments. And of course, there was a lot of concern over a possible attack that could be triggered by the same kind of incitement and tension that we've seen over the Temple Mount issue, and that indeed occurred, unfortunately, last night.
So Friday has been a very tense day also in Jerusalem, not only in the West Bank, especially, as you said, around the Temple Mount area with clashes between Palestinians and Israeli security forces. Those controversial metal detectors at the entrances to the Temple Mount still in place? What can we expect today?
Right, they're still in place for the time being. There are thought to be assessments that are still ongoing over whether they should perhaps be removed at some stage. It seems you get the impression, reading between the lines here, that perhaps the Israeli authorities are looking for a way to get off this tree that they seem to be stuck in, maybe needing a ladder to get off this high branch, and perhaps some regret over the use of this measure. There's been no official statements on that issue, but of course we're reading between the lines here. There seems to be some sort of effort to find a compromise that can allow a little more flexibility. The police have already said that they have the authority in their hands to decide to what degree these metal detectors are actually going to be used in the field, meaning they can decide that people can access the Al-Aqsa Mosque without necessarily going through the metal detectors, but those metal detectors are still where they were placed at the entrances to the compound, and they have not been removed so far.
Shai, we're also receiving certain reports that certain rallies are expected tonight in Israeli Arab towns, places like Kalandia, Taiba, Nazareth. Are the Israeli police and military preparing for another escalation, maybe in different locations as well?
Yes, that is very much in their minds. The police and the army in general have a lot of confidence in their ability to contain this kind of violence when it comes to the kind of riots that we saw yesterday. Again, it was dealt with more or less successfully in terms of the levels of violence that we saw. It could have been a lot worse. That is, frankly, the situation that we saw yesterday, even though there were, of course, 3 cases of deaths of Palestinians killed in the course of those clashes. There were a number of cases of injury, but still, we've seen much worse when you're talking about the Middle East, and the police have confidence in their ability to contain that kind of violence. The problem is a more unexpected sort of incident of the type that we did see here in Halamish last night, and some would say was not altogether that unexpected. We've seen quite a few rounds of violence where we've seen this kind of tension around the temple might trigger all sorts of attacks, whether they're carried out by organizations or lone wolves. And it could very well be the situation that this attack that we saw here last night was not the last. And this could further escalate the situation and bring to a worsening of the general state of affairs in the West Bank and in Israel in general.
Shai Ben-Ari, thank you so much for monitoring the situation in the West Bank for us closely this entire morning, we should say. And we're still here in the studio with Colonel Olivier Rafovitz. This attack in Halamish is clearly another peak in this deterioration that we've experienced in the security situation around Jerusalem and the West Bank in the last days. Are we at the outbreak of another intifada?
First of all, I believe that it's not only another attack, another terrible attack, it is a strategic attack. I mean that it's really has the capability to change all the game. And we are maybe facing, I don't know if it's a new intifada, but we believe that there is a possibility of a new situation, not only connected to Palestinians,
a pan-Muslim
exactly, because what we see, you are totally right, because what we see, it's not a clear Palestinian issue. It is a situation where Islamic radical groups and leaders and imams in Israel also are trying to mobilize the whole entire Islamic world, or Islamic population, in order to fight, to go to fight. Now, because this attack happened yesterday night after a week of tension and of a crisis in Jerusalem around Al-Aqsa, which is actually a symbolic place. You know, Al-Aqsa by itself is nothing else rather than a real symbolic place in order to mobilize, to recruit thousands of young people. And that's a change, that's the risk, and we are facing this risk right now. Now, where do we go? It depending on 2 main factors, to our opinion. To our opinion in the military, of course. One is the leadership in the Palestinian side. Does Mahmoud Abbas want to remain where he is right now? I mean, that very weak leader, close to Hamas.
Do you think he can de-escalate the situation if he wanted to, briefly, because we have to take a break shortly?
I think yes. I think yes, because he has all the tools in order to do it.
Okay, we'll continue right after. We're taking a short break right now. When we come back, we'll continue to discuss the latest developments in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, so do stick around for more.